The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Hello, I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and welcome to Benchmark. We'll explore a variety of issues involving our legal system and our justice system, and how they intersect with the citizens of the town of Colonie. Today, we are truly fortunate to have as our guest Judge Joseph Teresi. As many of you have well recognized over the years, Judge Teresi has served as our Supreme Court judge for over 20 years, and certainly our own town court for 20 years as a public defender assigned to the Colony Court. And we're so very fortunate to have Judge Teresi with us today. Welcome, Judge. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Well, we're really thrilled because I first met you in the Colony Town Court. Of course, I haven't left, but I first met you in 1980 when I was a young town attorney at the time, assigned to traffic court, and you were practicing then in the Colony Court, and actually over 20 years you served in that Colony Court, and you saw a lot of activity inside that courthouse.
Well, I started with the Public Defender's Office back in 1972, and served a year in what was the Albany Police Court back then, and then was transferred to the Town of Colonie Court, and I did serve for 20 years at various locations. When I first was assigned to the Colony Court, it was in the basement of the town hall. Then they moved out to Central Avenue, and then they moved to Aviation Road, and then they moved back to the town hall in what was the meeting room on the first floor where the town board meets, and then to Old Wolf Road. So I was at all the various locations over all those years. And as an enrolled Democrat, I'd like to say that I was the longest serving Democrat in the town of Colonie for those years.
Well, and you've continued to serve not only the town, but the entire county and capital region in a variety of capacities, and most recently as a Supreme Court judge. And last June, I believe you retired from active service as a Supreme Court judge. And I know that last September, the Albany County Bar Association came together and was so proud to be able to place a painting of you inside the corridors of the Albany County Courthouse, recognizing your significant contributions to the administration of justice here in Albany County. And that was a great day, standing room only event, and for all of us celebrating what you've done for us over the years. And we're so happy to. We have such little time to talk about the length and breadth of the career of Joe Teresi here today. But I love the early days here in Colonie, and you got to serve with a variety of judges which are loom large for me in my own life. Harry D'Agostino was a judge in the 60s, and you started there in the basement of our town hall. And then Judge Tate, Judge Rowland, who was out of the village of Colonie, servicing the town court, and being at Aviation Road, which was one of the court settings that is not known by many. They were probably was only there a couple years, I suppose. But that was also the headquarters for justice here in the town of Colonie, and you were every part of it.
Well, I was very fortunate to have a nice career with the Public Defender's Office, and not only the judges you mentioned, but the late Philip Caponera. He was a town judge for many years, and Nick Greisler, he was also a town judge. And not only did I serve in the town of Colonie as a public defender, but at the same time, as public defenders, we were assigned felony trials in county court. So I had the pleasure, if you want to call it, of defending individuals who went to trial before the late John Klein, Judge Harris, Judge John Turner, wonderful judges, and
Right.
And got to cut my teeth in those courts with many assistant district attorneys, including those that are very prominent today in the private practice, like Steve Coffey and Ray Kelly, and many others.
Well, Judge, your educational background is similar to mine in many ways, and I take great pride in identifying with you in that way, graduating from Boston College and Albany Law School. And it wasn't long after graduation that you got involved with the Public Defender's Office, but also in the private practice of law as well. And for 20 years you practiced with a local trial firm here in Albany County, didn't you?
Well, I really got off to start practicing with a solo practitioner of Paul Devane, who's a long-standing Albany lawyer, who I might add not only gave me a start, but I can probably think of 8 or 10 lawyers who are prominent in the Albany area that he would take in, help them get their feet wet, help them get started, show them the ins and outs of practicing law. And I was with him for a year before I went with the Ainsworth Sullivan Law Firm, which was a much larger firm, 13 or 15 lawyers. And we did primarily a general practice with an emphasis on defense work, representing individuals who were sued and representing them on behalf of their insurance companies in automobile accidents, products liability cases, medical malpractice cases. And being the junior member of the firm, I was the guy that was sent elsewhere. I would be sent to Plattsburgh, to Johnstown, to Schenectady, to Kingston, to Catskill. So I got to know lawyers not only in the Albany area, but in the outlying areas. I was on the road quite a bit.
Judge, it's interesting that you brought up Paul Devane. He was just before me last night, and he's still engaged in active practice. And many attorneys have told me the same thing that you've told me, too, that some of their earliest exposures to the practice of law here in Albany were through his office. And he's still practicing today, and with the same vigor and zeal that he always has. And it's always nice to see him in the courthouse as well. Tell me, Judge, when you were practicing privately, because I know as a public defender you were engaged in trial work as well as every other aspect of a criminal case, were you also trying cases in the civil practice in your private practice?
That was part of it.
Right.
Most definitely, I would try cases in all these outlying areas. The Albany cases in Ainsworth Sullivan were handled by the senior partners, Bruce Sullivan and Tom Teresi and John Knopf, and the younger lawyers were sent out on the road. And initially, you would go and attend conferences, or you would go do depositions or examinations before trial, and eventually you would be assigned a trial in Schenectady in front of a judge there, or Lake George, Warren County, where the Warren County Courthouse is. And it was an interesting experience because it was busy trial work in those days. A lot more cases were tried then than are tried now. Yes.
Judge, how do you, and that's a very good point that you've raised, because you, as a judge for 20 years, as one of our Supreme Court justices, you've certainly had a wide view of the style of practice that was taking place. And you've mentioned to me before that you found that there seems to be fewer trials today than there were when you started your practice. And even as a judge, you could see that fewer cases were going to trial. What is the reason for that, Judge? Are there a variety of reasons?
Well, I think first of all that not only do plaintiffs' lawyers, but the defendants' lawyers, and particularly the insurance company, have found that the cost of litigation has driven up over the years. The cost of witnesses, particularly medical witnesses, the cost of getting other types of witnesses, expert witnesses, accident reconstruction experts, has driven the cost up enormously. And as a result, in order to save money and to save clients money, I'll call it a cottage industry of alternative dispute mediation, which the courts promote too.
Right.
Arbitration, mediation, whether it be binding mediation or not, has developed. And I think a lot of cases go through those processes and get resolved as a result. So there just are not the number of cases being tried in the civil courts. In upstate New York, the volume is down, and I think to some degree the number of filings may be down as well to a small degree. So for that reason, there aren't as many trials. And in addition, I think the courts, particularly the judges, go the extra yard to conference cases a number of times before you reach that trial date to try to bring about a settlement and resolve the case.
Well, I know that a previous guest here was Stu Jones, and he certainly had been engaged in trial practice throughout his private practice, and he pointed out on the show that putting together sometimes even a jury is that he feels that the limits now, especially in criminal cases where your opportunity to spend time on voir dire is much more limited, in his opinion, so it also gives rise to consider other ways to get to a conclusion. Do you find that there's compression on even the picking juries these days, and is that more complicated, or is there just not enough time given to defense counsel, in their opinion, to pick the jury? Do you see that compression at all?
Well, I think if you talked to the attorneys, they would like as much time as they want, whether they need it or not, to question juries during voir dire.
Right.
The courts have held that time limits, particularly in criminal cases, is appropriate. And in criminal cases, as you know, the judge who sits on the case is a major participant in jury selection and spends a substantial amount of time questioning the jurors once they're placed in the jury box on routine areas such as their pedigree, where they come from, what their family consists of, what their prior jury experience is, what their employment is, and their spouse's or partner's employment. So a lot of those routine questions that lawyers would ordinarily ask are already by the board, so to speak. So that gives the lawyers time to ask the important questions about how a juror feels about drugs, if it's a drug case, how a juror feels about domestic violence, if that's the issue in the case. And the courts have held that judges can limit the questioning in time, sometimes as short as 30 minutes, and make the lawyers get down to business and ask those questions appropriately. Now, in civil cases, it'll depend upon the judge. Most judges don't impose time limits in civil cases. And when I was presiding on cases, if I knew the lawyers and the lawyers would say to me, we think we can get a jury by late morning or early afternoon, and this is certainly not going to take all day, then I would let the lawyers go out and pick the jury without time limits, and I would be available if there was a problem. So that is a major change in trials, and I think the lawyers who are experienced understand that the more questions you ask a jury, and the more of their time that you take, the more chance it is that you're going to upset somebody, or you're going to bore them, or they're going to think that you're just wasting their time.
Judge, it seems clear to me that not every person who ascends to the Supreme Court, our trial level court here in the state of New York, brings with them significant trial practice like you did. And your practice not only civilly, but also as a public defender, trying felony cases before the judges down at the Albany County Courthouse. gave you a reputation for understanding how trials work and being able to manage trials at every level. And in your first few years as a Supreme Court judge, you were asked to continue to spend much of your time adjudicating criminal matters. Is that right, Judge?
Well, when I was elected to Supreme Court, I was elected with the idea that I'd be doing civil cases. Unfortunately,
Right.
things happen. I don't think I was on the bench a year, and one of our then county judges, John Turner, became ill, and I was assigned his criminal calendar for until another county judge was elected. Over the years, I've done the same, not only in Albany County, but in other counties. I would volunteer to take criminal trials that were trial ready over many years. There was a period of time when I volunteered to become what we call the SCI judge. That means Superior Court Information Judge. That's a procedure where a defendant agrees to waive a grand jury presentation of a serious felony and agrees to a certain plea bargain. So during that 3-year period that I did that, which was in the Albany County Courthouse before the Judicial Center was built, I would conference on a given day. It was usually a Tuesday. I would usually conference anywhere from 6 to 10 cases. I would take pleas in maybe some of those cases, upwards to 6 to 10 cases. And at the same time, because I've already taken pleas in other cases, I would be doing 6 to 10 sentencings. In each of those 3 years, I think I helped dispose of approximately 400 plus cases each and every year. So we were very busy.
And Judge, you did that on top of the civil cases that were assigned to you by the court system as well.
My responsibilities on the civil side were not reduced. I kept the same percentage of cases assigned to me as before I became the SCI judge. And that's what happens when you volunteer. That goes with the philosophy of the judges in Albany County. We all helped each other. If somebody had a scheduling problem, one judge would cover for another judge. We're all in it for the same thing. So
that's right.
I think Albany County is probably unique in that instance, that the judges are so cooperative with each other.
Well, it certainly helps because we all recognize that the judicial system is challenged by the needs imposed on it by society, and it takes that kind of cooperation to make it work. I know we do that in Colonie, and we're really running a full-time court on a part-time basis because this is the structure that's been given to us, but it certainly, as the 25th busiest criminal court in the entire state of New York now, as of last year, and routinely every year, it's time for that footprint to be reanalyzed as we move through 25,000 cases a year here in the Colonie Justice Court. And the cooperation that you've put together with the judges assigned to our area was paramount to your ability to keep moving things along. You became well recognized by the court administration in the state of New York for your capacity in criminal cases and in civil cases and in managing trials. And there came a time that you were assigned a case out of New York City, which was a case of much celebrity at the time. And I believe it was referred to as People of the State of New York versus Boss. And I believe that you were asked by the Office of Court Administration to preside in that case. Can you give us some background about that case, Judge, and some of the ultimate rulings that you made, which stand today?
Well, that case arose out of a police shooting that happened in the borough of the Bronx back in 1999. A young West African immigrant by the name of Amadou Diallo was shot and killed by 4 New York City police officers that were members of what existed at the time as a street crimes unit. And they were on patrol looking for a suspect in a rape case. And as they came down a street, which was a darkened street, they saw a figure coming in and out of the doorway, and the lighting was not good. And they thought that the actions of that individual was suspicious from their perspective. The person would step out of onto the stoop and then walk back into the shadows, and walk back into the shadows when they saw this unmarked police car come down the street. And the 4 police officers exited the police car and approached the stoop. And as they did, Mr. Diallo went to remove his wallet from his pocket to show his identification. The officers were plainclothes officers, although they wore badges around their neck. And when Mr. Diallo removed his wallet, they believed that it was a weapon. And one opened fire, and then all 4 of them opened fire. A total of 41 shots were fired, killing Mr. Diallo, and the officers were indicted by a Bronx County grand jury for murder and other offenses, other serious felonies. And they were arraigned in the Supreme Court of Bronx County. There was a public uproar over the case, as you see today in police cases, cases where individuals die at the hands of the police. And it was no different back then. There were marches on police headquarters in New York City. There were marches in the borough of the Bronx. And the defendants in that case made an application to the appellate division of the 2nd Department in New York City to have the case transferred to another county. And the judges in the appellate division agreed because of the amount of publicity, because of the overbearing of the demonstrations and the public distrust and disbelief of the police. The court felt that a fair trial could not be held in the Bronx, and it was transferred to Albany County. And all this was distant to us in Albany. I mean, we would read about the case and read about the demonstrations. And one afternoon, I was sitting in my office, and I received a phone call from Jonathan Lippman, who's now the chief judge of this state, but at the time was the chief administrative judge in this state. And he said to me, he said, "I'm calling you to ask you if you'd be willing to preside on this case that's being transferred to Albany County." And he promised me, and he lived up to his word, that whatever logistics and support that I needed to try this case in Albany would be given to me. And I agreed to take the case. And his last words to me on the phone was, "We're going to have a lot of fun doing this." And I hung up, and when he hung up, I said to myself, "What's he talking about? We're going to have a lot of fun."
Right.
He's in New York City, and I'm up here with this trial. So, so he had a strange sense of humor. But the case was tried at the Albany County Courthouse. I met with the lawyers several times ahead of time, and we took over, so to speak, the 4th floor of the Albany County Courthouse. The district attorney's office in Albany gave the prosecutor's office. I gave the defense counsel a conference room to use where they could group together and meet with their clients during the breaks. Security was beefed up. The Albany court officers were brought from the New York City and downstate area to beef up the courthouse. The security in the courthouse was beefed up. We had metal detectors imposed, which were never used before that, for everybody entering the courthouse.
That's right.
The state police came to the courthouse every morning at 6 o'clock, and they had bomb dogs go through all the rooms and all the courtrooms so that the building was cleared. And the purpose of that is if there is a bomb threat made by phone call or otherwise during the day, they know that they've already cleared the courtroom, and they can assess the realistic threat, whether it's going to be real or whether it's fiction or not.
Right.
So we had a lot of personnel in the courthouse. The case was tried. The officers were acquitted of all charges. There were demonstrations before the trial, during the trial, across the street in the park across the street from the courthouse.
Right.
The case was televised day in and day out for 30 days on what was then Court TV, which was a cable television station. And I allowed cameras in the courtroom by ruling that the existing law at the time, which prohibited cameras in the courtroom, was unconstitutional.
And Judge, that certainly, that ruling is still vibrant today, and well, that ruling of yours was not appealed, has not been appealed, and it sits as the last word on cameras in the courtroom. You did provide some parameters as to how that would all work, and in that way, and I think, one camera in a certain spot, and they can only film certain areas of the courtroom. But it still stands today, and there was a variety of reasons that probably came through your mind as you developed that ruling. And what were some of those things that you were thinking about at the time in deciding the need for ensuring that this proceeding be televised and made available for consumption by the citizens?
Well, from a legal perspective, there was constitutional reasons that this is a public trial, and the public has the right to know what goes on in courtrooms, because the public can't always be to the courthouse. So in this day, technological day,
right,
when cable TV is available and the internet's available, this is a perfect way to bring the courtroom to the public. In this particular case, this was a case involving the death of Amadou Diallo and the trial of 4 New York City police officers that was at the heart of the people of the city of New York. They had a big interest in the outcome of this case. This case was being tried in Albany. The Albany courthouse was not easily accessible to anybody in the New York City area. They couldn't take a subway to the courthouse, or drive down to the courthouse with any ease. So that the people in the New York City area would have a day in and day out ability to see the witnesses, hear the testimony. I thought that was important. And in the Albany County Courthouse itself, we allowed one still photographer in the courtroom using a camera that made no noise, and those pictures were available to all news agencies. We allowed one television camera in the courtroom, and that television camera televised all the proceedings in the courtroom involving the lawyers, the witnesses, and the judge. Spectators were not photographed or televised. And not only was that television played from the courtroom, but we had another courtroom in the courthouse because we had limited seating in the trial courtroom. So they televised the proceedings in a separate courtroom downstairs in the courtroom. So we took over 2 courtrooms, and that second courtroom was conducted just like a courtroom. There was no talking, no food allowed in it.
Right.
And because of the limited seating in both of the courtrooms, if somebody got up to left, and for whatever reason, they would lose their seat if there was somebody outside waiting for a seat. Right. So it was, we did this, I thought it came out very well overall, the way things were done. There were television trucks parked on Eagle Street all the way over to State Street and up Washington Avenue. It was a big media event.
You're not kidding, Judge. How long did it take from start to finish?
We took a month to try this case. Yeah, and we had I should mention this. We had a big concern of the security of the jurors because we didn't want the jury to be influenced unduly. So what Sheriff Campbell arranged at that time is that the jurors agreed. Once the jury was selected, we had 16 jurors, 12 deliberating and 4 alternates. They met in the parking lot of the OTB Center on Central Avenue. And in the morning, sheriff's vans, 2 sheriff's vans would meet them there, bring them down to the courthouse. They would enter and exit by a side entrance of the building, and at night they were taken back to the parking lot of the OTB Center.
Up on Central Avenue.
Up on Central
The old
Avenue.
Kings.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that certainly was a major undertaking, and you were asked to supervise that and adjudicate that issue and be the trial judge in that because of your tremendous experience, certainly in trial practice and in criminal trial practice as well. So much so that even subsequent to that, you were asked by the Office of Court Administration to go down to New York City and with Judge Breslin and others to try to alleviate some of the case backlog that was involved with down in the city boroughs, and that you made some progress down there. You were asked to do that. You've been asked to serve in the North Country. You've been in Essex County. You've been in Warren County, and in New York City cases. And did you find the New York City, was there a dramatic difference in how the practice was under, the criminal practice was in New York City as opposed to in Albany County?
The practice itself by the lawyers is, I didn't find a difference. The cases were much similar to what we have here. The problem in the big urban areas such as New York City is logistics, getting people from one place to another, getting a prisoner from Rikers Island into a courtroom in the Bronx. Sometimes the prisoners come from Rikers Island. They wouldn't get to the Bronx courthouse till 10 o'clock or 10:30, which means you don't get them upstairs to your courtroom maybe till 11 o'clock.
Right.
Wow. That's a big problem. Logistics are very difficult. Jurors, some of them don't have a workable ability to speak or understand English. It makes jury selection sometimes difficult. We were told when we first arrived there, when we were assigned a case our first day there, that we were each getting a case and that it might take 2 or 3 days to pick a jury. Judge Tom Breslin, and the third judge was a judge named John Bernetti. He's from Syracuse. He's an acting Supreme Court judge, Court of Claims judge. Both of them have much more trial experience than I have. So being the visiting team, we assumed it would take us 2 or 3 days. Well, apparently our approach was a little bit different than the lawyers were used to. The first day in the Bronx, Judge Breslin picked a jury and held opening statements. John Bernetti picked a jury, and if he was allowed another 15 or 20 minutes, probably could have had opening statements done. And I completed my jury selection as well. So it was a little bit of a surprise to the lawyers and to our fellow judges that we were able to do that right out of the box. And that continued during our trials down there. We each tried during that month. It varied from 3 to 4 cases and resolved by trial or pleas. I think it was about 6 cases apiece. So it was an interesting experience. So, and that program carried on, I think, for 6 months. 3 judges were sent there from other parts of the state. We just happened to be the very first group. Interesting times.
They certainly sent the A-team to start the program, and of course you're always in the front of the line volunteering to lend your service in a variety of areas as needed by the court system. And we both know that the court system is exceedingly stretched, not only at the local level, but certainly at the state level as well. Of course, time doesn't permit. We have so many other things to talk about too, and your administration of justice on Article 78 proceedings and the famous case dealing with the use of the pesticide DEET, and also you were ruling on casino gambling long before the citizens of the state were given an opportunity to vote on it. So many issues involving the capital region and the state of New York have been influenced by Judge Joseph Teresi, and we thank you for your service, and we thank you for being with us today, Judge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. I enjoyed being here.
I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and thank you for joining me on Benchmark.